Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Thursday, November 18th, 2021. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Rice on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the Start Here link in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Rice's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book is a narrative description of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 17 years to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any experience of a negative emotional state into part of the infallible guidance system that each one of us has been given. It's an internal guidance system. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click on the link, download it, print it off, and use it as often as you'd like. You can also go to your app store and type in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. And before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll get access to a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. You can also download a whole host of audio files of shows like this one, including yesterday's show where I stepped through a worksheet process of my own, and those shows contain episodes like that where people have actually been stepped through the worksheet process, and shows where people have given powerful testimonials about how the application of that worksheet process has been a positive benefit in their lives. If you have a comment or a question, if you want some help working through a worksheet, if you've got a suggestion for a topic for a show or someone for us to interview, give us a call, 563-999-3581. And once you call that number, if you want to talk, press the number 1. It'll put a question mark by your phone number, and I'll announce you by your area code. We're also doing this year the Course in Miracles workbook lessons. This is the 322nd day of the year. Today's lesson simply reads, I can give up only that which was never real. The commentary reads, I sacrifice illusions, nothing more. Nothing real can be destroyed. Nothing unreal exists. That's right near the beginning of the Course in Miracles in the intro. So here we're being reminded of that again in this lesson, 322 days in. And as illusions go, I find the gifts illusions tried to hide. Right? As I get the illusions out of the way, I see the true gifts of life and creation awaiting me in shining welcome, in the readiness to give the Creator's ancient messages to me. The Creator's memory abides in every gift that I receive, and every dream serves only to conceal my higher self, my true self, which is the Creator's only offspring, the likeness of the Creator, the Holy One, the one mind who still abides in that Creator forever, as the Creator still abides in each and every one of us. So, Father, to you all sacrifice remains forever inconceivable. Nothing can be lost or gained. It is all here all the time. And so I cannot sacrifice except my dreams. As you created me, I can give up nothing you gave me. What you did not give to me has no reality. What loss can I anticipate except the loss of fear and the return of love into my mind? So the Pam Grout's Course in Miracles experiment, lesson number 327, is titled, Hit the Road, Smack, No More, No More. She quotes Jodi Picoult as saying, words are like eggs dropped from great heights. You can no more call them back than ignore the mess they leave when they fall. Pam writes, when I talk smack about my life, even little things like, quote, oh, I wish I'd gotten up earlier, close quotes, or quote, I wish that idiot in the passenger lane hadn't cut me off, close quote. Whenever I do that, I create a resonant field of issues and problems. Instead of playing beautiful symphonies with my words, instead of utilizing them to create dreams, I often waste them moaning about problems. Lesson 322 says, forget about it. Those problems are just the ego talking, and the ego is not real. Grievances hide all of the gifts that await me in shining welcome, as this lesson calls it. Beyond the illusions is the dude's overriding message. Quote, sacrifice remains forever inconceivable. Close quotes. The only thing I could ever lose is my fear. So, I anticipate the loss of fear and the return of love into my mind. That's today's Course in Miracles workbook and the Course in Miracles experiment commentary. And as usual, we've got about 50 minutes left to entertain your comments or questions, suggestions. I should remind people that today's a Thursday, so there will be a support group available through Zoom tonight from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time. All the information you need for joining that group is available on the MindShiftersAcademy.org website. And please remember there's a separate login info page for the Tuesday and the Thursday group. So, we have time for your comments and your questions. What was your response to yesterday's session and the worksheet that I did online? What is your comment or question about your own issue and how to apply a worksheet to that issue? I don't see our brand new caller from yesterday who had a 248 area code, and he was calling because he wanted somebody to talk to because he was depressed and upset. And he found us on Blog Talk Radio. So here's hoping that's one more person who's been introduced to the worksheet process and will take advantage of it and start turning those negative emotional states that he was experiencing into part of his own guidance system. I think I mentioned that on Tuesday we had a support group. I'll hold that because we have somebody from area code 904 calling in. You're in the air, 904. Give us a name, and how can we support you?
Well, aloha. My name is Dusty. I'm in
Dusty?
Yes. And I'm an old friend of Michael's, actually, from way back. And
Dusty, I can barely hear you, and my volume is all the way up. Can you speak up, please? Dusty, are you there? And now I hear nothing. Now I hear rustling. Dusty, are you there? It's even less. There's a faint echo of a voice off in the distance. However, the rustling is very clear, so there's something touching your microphone.
I will call right back.
Now, there I can hear you. All right, we'll wait for Dusty. I'm turning my volume back down to the normal level. And I don't know where Dusty is located, but he said aloha. Maybe he's one of our listeners from Hawaii. And the person that called in yesterday that had the same kind of area code as Michelle, who does work for us, running the switchboard from time to time, was from Detroit. Here's another attempt with Dusty. Are you there? The call dropped again. So our call-in number is 563-999-3581. Dusty, are you there?
I am trying very much. My phone just blitzed out, and I'm trying, but it's not going into the right mode. And I apologize for taking your time. I'll try it again when I got this worked out. Thank you.
All right, blessings. So I just got a text message from someone, as you might have heard, because my phone wasn't on silent. And this person is asking for a clarification for the difference between using affirmations and changing neural pathways. So that's a powerful question. I think there are many ways to answer that. The biggest difference, or the biggest dynamic that changes something, rather than just using positive affirmations, is to be aware that as I use affirmations, I'm using words. I'm using my conscious logical mind. And as Michael Rice points out, eventually there is a connection, there is a dynamic that Michael calls the regulatory speech center of the brain, and it is possible to work with my words, watch my words, and change them and start to change the programming in my brain. And that is a possibility. It's also really important to understand that I can talk and talk and talk and talk and not change a thing about my neural pathways if in my unconscious mind, or in the part of my mind that I'm not willing to look at directly, I'm hiding from myself negative conclusions, traumatic energies, etc. So what the people who do the research on trauma talk about is having a visceral experience, having the energy of the emotions activated and up in my system while I make a corrective shift. So Bessel van der Kolk is one of the premier researchers for trauma, healing trauma. I think he's got a trauma center that he's run for over 30 years. And I was just about to talk about how on Tuesday night in our group we had 3 people who each had significant abusive childhoods and we listened to one of the chapters from Bessel van der Kolk's book, and the book is titled "The Body Keeps the Score." And one of the things that's pointed out in that book is that as we go through events in our lives and we download disruptive energies, which become the residual effects of a past trauma, as that happens, each of us is creating different neural pathways, different defense mechanisms in our system, different needs, therefore, for healing. Right? There's no such thing as one-size-fits-all healing for trauma. That's one of the first things he talks about in the preface of that book. There's a lot of good stuff in that book about healing trauma, and about the chapter particularly that we were listening to on Tuesday was about how when traumatic energy is stored in the body, it disrupts your experience of your body. So there are people who literally lose their ability to know what they're feeling physically and emotionally. And they lose it because it was part of an adaptation that their body created in order to survive a trauma or to cope with the negative effects of something they experienced as being traumatic. So when my neural pathways get set or adjusted to cope with a traumatic energy, then every time anything related to that energy, any thought, any image, any physical sensation, any emotion gets triggered in my mind, the adaptation that I created to cope with the pain of the trauma or the disruption of the trauma kicks in and replays. So the difference between just saying a positive affirmation and rewiring my neural pathways is I may need to put my body in a posture or a position that is antithetical to or the same as what happened when I was traumatized. So, for instance, I did an interview with Dr. Pat Ogden from the Sensory Motor Institute out in Colorado, and she's pioneered work in watching people's physical movements, eye movements, hand movements, breath, etc., as they speak, especially if they're talking about something traumatic. And when she notices a change in their motor movements or their facial expression, then she will highlight that for them and ask them to either go back and do that move again or to move in an opposite way. And when that happens, all kinds of things shift in the person's body, in their perspective, in their experience. Here's another example. I had a woman come to see me earlier this year, and she had been attacked by a dog quite viciously and required surgery and stitches. And fortunately, it was one of those 2-session miracle cure type things. And this can happen when you're well trained in different trauma types, trauma resolution techniques, and the trauma you're working on is not prolonged childhood trauma or 17 combat missions, etc. This is just this one specific event. And so the woman came in, and we did a little bit of the EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And I combined that with the the technique that's called brain spotting, which basically just notices what eye movement position is associated with the most physical and emotional upset. So I combined those two, and the woman said, wow, that's amazing. I think about that trauma right now. This is after maybe, 20 minutes into our second session. And she felt like she was fixed, cured, miracle. And I said, okay, now remember how you said that when the dog jumped up and bit your arm and tried to pull you off the chair, that you were terrified that if it got you on the ground, it would go for your neck and kill you. It's one of those breeds that's known to be quite vicious at times. And she said, yes. And I said, and when you talked about that, you leaned off to your left and dragged your arm low. So I said, why don't you just get in that position, shift, like your arm is hanging off the chair and you're being pulled down to the left. And she did, and immediately flooded with tears and emotions and shaking. And then we went through the brain spotting and the EMDR procedure until that was relieved. Well, the point here is, the question is, what's the difference between a positive affirmation and changing neural pathways? Well, I could have told her, that's great, when she said, I think about that dog biting me and I don't have any more problems anymore. And when she was sitting upright in her chair, comfortable in my office, she was being honest. She could think about the image of the dog grabbing her and biting her, and she didn't have any upset. But it didn't change the neural pathways in her that were related to the position she was in when she had the terror and the terrifying thought that if this dog gets me on the ground, it's going to go for my neck and kill me. So when she moved into that position, holding all of these other aspects of the trauma, all of a sudden the neural pathways associated with that trauma and the belief that she's going to die flooded into her experience. Once it was up, now when we do the breathing and the self-calming and the eye movements and the alternating bilateral stimulation and the brain spotting technique, she released that energy, and that's a kind of a primary example of the difference between just talking about, I feel so much better and thank you, and that visualization was nice, and now I'm visualizing myself being safe around that dog, and that's an affirmation type approach, as opposed to actually accessing the thoughts, the images, the physical sensations, the body postures, and the energy of, oh my God, I'm going to die, or whatever the traumatic response was, and letting it get activated in the human being in the moment, and then applying the corrective. And then the brain does its work to make sense of the fact that I have this felt sense, I have this visceral knowing I'm going to die. And I downloaded it when that dog almost pulled me off the chair and was ripping my arm apart, so much that I needed surgery to put my arm back together. But when I'm sitting here in the therapist's office, or when I'm driving my car and with my friends, I feel safe, I know I'm safe, I have that knowing. But the other knowing that I'm going to die and this dog's going to rip my throat out is buried in my mindset. It's buried in my consciousness. And until I can access it in the context of the safety of a therapeutic environment and with practice of the proper tools to help it be resolved, my mind hides from me the physical knowing that I'm going to die. I'm not safe. And so I can have, an infinite number of worldviews. Some of them say I'm a lousy person. Some of them say I'm a very effective therapist. Some of them say I'm a pretty good dad. Some of them say I'm a lousy parent. I can have all of those worldviews in my consciousness and not be aware of them, because I'll only be looking at one worldview at a time. And within each worldview that comes into my mind at a conscious level, my mind will be actively working to make sense of that worldview. So if I get triggered to the trauma of the dog that was, ripping my arm apart and dragging me to the ground, if I get triggered to that experience, I can be in a car with loving friends, laughing one minute, having, this perfectly wonderful time, and the next minute, my mind will show me, Tim, you're in danger of dying right now, and I'll have a panic attack. And nobody around me will be able to make any sense of it because they don't have access to that worldview in me that contains the implicit, emotionally based, deep felt knowing that I'm going to die. And just as quickly as it came, if I make a shift, I use a tool, we drive past the place that had the picture of the dogs that was, the dogs in the picture were playing, but they were jumping up, and that triggered my thought of the dog that jumped up and grabbed my arm. Whatever that is, as I move past it and I shift my focus, a different worldview comes into my direct view and experience. And within that worldview, everything I see helps me understand that I'm safe, and the world is a safe place, and I'm surrounded by friends. So, I can talk about how I'm safe until I'm completely out of breath and ready for bed at night, but it won't change if I'm holding within my consciousness, within my mindset, that part of me that I'm not looking at in this moment, we call it the unconscious. If I'm holding in that realm deep visceral knowings of trauma, and I'm not safe, and I may die, etc. And there's no amount of simply repeating affirmations that will access and resolve my unconscious, deeply held, viscerally awake and alive, implicit emotional knowings. So, that's the answer to a question, and that will be in the archives for the person that sent that in. And we've got about 30 minutes left if we need them. 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. I see the 904 area code number back up. If you want to try again, just press 1 on your phone, and we'll try to address your comments or questions. Dusty? 563-999-3581. Dusty, are you there?
I am, but my phone is malfunctioning. I apologize for that.
Well, we can hear you now if you're ready to talk.
Oh, you can. Oh, good. I'm yelling into my microphone with all kinds of displays that aren't supposed to be there in front of me. But I'm glad you can hear me. Thank you for your program. I just picked up some tips. Thank you for that. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes. What would that question be?
Earlier you talked about having little, I don't know, I'm going to use my own words here, I guess, mind loops, where you're dwelling on something insignificant, little yan-yan-yan-yans like that. I try to stay in present time, but I live alone, so now and then, so quite often, actually, I find myself in some kind of meaningless loop that does no good for me or anybody, and I wonder if you have any tips, maybe on how to deal with that, other than, to be aware and breathe, that sort of thing.
Well, so if Michael Rice were here and when he was at an intensive, he would turn to his whiteboard and point to the top of it where it would say all of the above. So all of the tools Michael has might be used in various ways to help stop a negative recurring thought that's playing in a loop. One of the ways that yields a lot of benefit for Michael and other people who use the tools is to identify the goal that could be derived from that negative talk and put it on a worksheet. Another way is to just focus on the breath and watch the negative thought loops with gentle, childlike curiosity. And so instead of fighting against it, just chuckling at, wow, look at that. I'm really beating myself up heavy today. I seem to be stuck in this negative thought loop. You're a lousy therapist, you're a bad husband, you're, only barely adequate as a parent, whatever my negative thought loop is, and just kind of laugh about it, chuckle at it. Another one is the very, very similar to Michael's work is Byron Katie's work. And Byron Katie's work can be summarized by the awareness that she had that she only suffers when she believes her negative thoughts. So she can have all the negative thoughts, that any that want to come floating through her mind, and she lets them be there and she lets them float through, and if they seem to have some edge to them or they seem to keep recurring, then she'll pull out her worksheet, which is, in some ways very, very similar to Michael's, and it's just having her question, what's the truth of this thought? Is it true is the first question. Often the first answer is yes, it's true. The second question is, can I absolutely, without any doubt, know that it's true? And the truly honest person usually then says, well, no, I can't absolutely, beyond any shadow of a doubt, know that this is true. But even if the answer is yes, then you move on to the next question, which is, how do I feel when I believe this is true? And I answer that question deeply. I let myself really get in touch with the visceral physical sensations, the emotions, etc. And then the fourth question is, what would my life be like if I no longer believed this thought? And then beyond that, on her worksheet, she's got several turnarounds. So let's say my thought is, this person betrayed me, and that's got me all upset because I feel like I've been betrayed or abandoned by someone. So the turnaround would be, this person didn't abandon me. This person is always there for me. Or this person did what they did for my benefit. Or another turnaround might be, I abandoned this person. And just playing with those questions and turnarounds and being willing to sit with them and embody them usually dismantles the negative impact of the negative thoughts. So there's a couple ideas for you.
Well, those are wonderful. I bet you can hear me now better, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I finally anyways, yes. I mean, those are some great things, and the one that leaped out, left out for me, that really resonated was the one on chuckling. I love that one, and I'm going to carry that through with me. And I don't call in even on Michael's show very often, but I do find, by the way, and I guess I'm saying this as much as anybody listening that might be on the fence about calling, is that by having a short dialogue and letting myself say and be heard, I don't know, sometimes it helps me go forward for some reason. It kind of helps coagulate or congeal that whole way of being, just by the fact that we're talking, or there's this dialogue, and I appreciate the clear way you have of putting things. I wanted to share one real short little, I don't know whether you call it a blessing or what you call it really, but it's about the chuckling thing, and it says, "Blessed are we who can laugh at ourselves, for we shall always be amused." And boy, that's always true. And so chuckling and keeping that kind of humor going, that works for me. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome and deserving. Is there anything else we can do to support you today?
I've enjoyed what I have heard today a lot, and it has spoke to me, and I think I would just rather listen to you. Thank you.
All right. Blessings. Thanks for the call. So we have about 21 minutes left, 20 minutes left. We don't really need to use them all, because today Michael and Jeannie's hour is going to be a replay of Empowered to Heal Part 1. They've had something come up in their day today, short notice, and so they will be unavailable, and we'll play the Best of show Empowered to Heal Part 1. And if my guess is correct, this is the audio of Michael's 2-hour workshop titled Empowered to Heal. And it is the first hour of that 2-hour workshop. When I did that workshop in my Tuesday support group for years, that was one of my favorite videos. We would watch each of those videos at least twice a year. And I was always glad when that came up. And there were times when I would choose to play that for new people, actually break the rotation and listen to it again, because it's so useful to help us begin to think about how everything is energy, and everything we choose to do with our words, with our thoughts, is a creative process. And so if we allow these negative thoughts to flow and fight against them and believe them and get bitter about them, then basically we're adding energy, and a negative energy, to our experience, to the field of life around us. On the other hand, if I recognize, hey, everything's energy, and this stuff, as thoughts can just flow through me, and I don't have control over that, but I do have control over whether or not I get upset over it. I do have control over whether or not I pour a lot of negative mind energy into the thought. Or, as we were talking about with Dusty, if I just take a fundamentally entertained and entertaining approach to this thing we call life, the process of life flowing into in, through, as, and around me. And I just watch it and say, wow, that's interesting. Michael Singer would call us to just watch when you have an intense heartache or upset. Just watch it with curiosity and say, wow, I had no idea that my heart was capable of creating such intense physical and emotional sensations. And if I do that, rather than judge it as bad and fight against it, I create a very different experience of life in that moment. So, more on that in Michael's Empowered to Heal, Part 1, coming up. And again, tonight, 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time, there will be a Mind Shifter support group on Zoom. I'll be sitting here in Crystal Lake, Illinois, but you can be wherever you want on the globe as long as you've got internet access. And you can join us, or you can do somebody else a favor and pass the information along to them, and they can join us. It's absolutely free, and all of the information for how to join us in that support group on Zoom tonight from 6:30 to 9 p.m. Central is available at the mindshiftersacademy.org website. In the meantime, we have 17 minutes left, maybe 15. 563-999-3581. If you call that number and press 1, we can have a conversation. I've had several people recently who ask me about books and about book titles for one topic or another. And I'll mention, because that's happened again today, somebody asked me for the titles of a book that might work for boundaries. And if you go to mindshiftersacademy.org, there's a page of book titles, books that we've discussed on the Mind Shifters Radio. These days we're calling it a podcast. And those books include things like The Empath Survival Guide by Judith Orloff, the book by Peter Levine titled In an Unspoken Voice, How the Body Releases Trauma and Restores Goodness, Welcoming the Unwelcome by Pema Chodron, Healing Depression by Jody Skillicorn without medication, Necessary Endings by Dr. Henry Cloud. The reason that came up is because someone texted me today and asked for a book title on boundaries. And so I ended up sending the one that's by Cloud and Townsend, Dr. Henry Cloud, and I think it's Peter Townsend, although that might be my mind playing tricks with me because of the Who. And so that book is written by two people who identify as Christian authors. There's also Anne Catherine, and she's written 2 books on boundaries. One of them is Where to Draw the Line, How to Set Healthy Boundaries Every Day. And there's another one that she's written. So if you know somebody who's struggling with boundaries or wants to know how to define boundaries or how to use boundaries more, I'll call it effectively in their lives, those are 2 books. And I recommend that you go through the mindshiftersacademy.org website and scroll through the list of books we've discussed, things like Proof of Heaven by Eben Alexander, Suggestible You by Eric Vance, The Verbally Abusive Relationship, How to Recognize and Respond by Patricia Evans. Course in Miracles Made Easy by Alan Cohen, which is a book that I probably read at least once a year, if not twice a year. It Didn't Start With You by Mark Wolin. 2 books by Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment. Relationship Magic by Guy Finley. The Courage to Be Free by Guy Finley. Several books by Anthony DeMello, Awareness and Taking Flight. The book by Matt Kahn titled Whatever Arises, Love That. Everything is Here to Help You by Matt Kahn. Sherry Huber wrote a book titled There Is Nothing Wrong With You, Going Beyond Self-Hate, a compassionate process for learning to accept yourself exactly as you are. James and Steph Pupura wrote a book, Perception, Seeing is Not Believing. So, wonderful resources available in the archives at whyagain.org. Almost a few years ago now, I expanded our efforts to get exposure for this work, and I created the Mindshifters Academy.org website and put some files up there for audio files. It's a little bit easier to find some of those, and so that's another good resource. And so if no one has a comment or a question, we've only got about 12 minutes left in this hour. I'll go ahead and start the second hour, which is going to be an hour of the lecture, Empowered to Heal, Part 1. Dr. Michael Rice giving one of my favorite out of the 15 or 16 or 17 different DVDs that are available. And you can purchase those DVDs and listen to them on your own at whyagain.org. Or you can start your own support group, which is how this Mindshifters Radio began, as a mechanism to support people who were going to be starting their own support groups after Michael and Jeannie had been through town sharing the process of all of the various tools. They usually would give 5 or 6 lectures in a week, and then offer people the opportunity to participate in still point breathing, and then they'd move on, and there'd be no support for the support group if they wanted to start, or for people who wanted to learn about it. And so they jumped at the chance back in 2001, at the beginning of that year. Let's see, not 2001, 2011. And they started the Mindshifters Radio Show, which is what you're listening to now. And for the first 8 years, it went 1 hour a day, 5 days a week. And for the last more than 2.5 years now, pushing 3 years now, we've had 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, since I felt called to help expand the exposure to this work. So that's available in the archive. The website at mindshiftersacademy.org is available. And one last call, if you're interested, there's a support group tonight on Zoom, and or you can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org and submit your comments, your questions, or your suggestions for someone that we might interview, either for the Journey's Dream On Your Mind podcast or the very show you're listening to now, the Mindshifters Radio. So without further ado, here's Dr. Michael Rice doing the first hour of Empowered to Heal. I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false.